Captain Sarah Mitchell stood at attention in the communications center of Fort Harrison, her hands trembling slightly as she held the classified intelligence report. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the rows of computer monitors and radio equipment. It was 0300 hours, and the base was mostly quiet except for the skeleton crew manning essential operations. Sarah had been working at the base for 3 years now, ever since graduating from the military academy with honors. She was known for her dedication, sharp mind, and unwavering commitment to duty. Tonight, however, she had discovered something that made her stomach churn with worry. The report in her hands contained evidence of a serious security breach. Someone had been selling classified information to foreign contacts, and the trail led directly to several high-ranking officers on the base. Sarah knew she had to report this immediately, but she also knew the consequences would be severe for everyone involved. Major David Carson, her immediate supervisor, had been acting strangely for weeks. He would disappear for hours without explanation, take mysterious phone calls in private, and seemed increasingly agitated whenever security protocols were mentioned. Sarah had tried to dismiss her suspicions, but the evidence was now undeniable. As she walked down the dimly lit corridor toward Major Carson's office, Sarah's heart pounded against her ribs. She could hear her own footsteps echoing off the concrete walls, and every shadow seemed to hide potential danger. The weight of responsibility pressed down on her shoulders like a heavy blanket. Major Carson's office door was slightly ajar, and she could see him hunched over his desk, frantically stuffing papers into a briefcase. His usually neat uniform was disheveled, and sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool night air. When Sarah knocked gently on the doorframe, he spun around with wild eyes. "Captain Mitchell," he said, his voice strained and defensive. "What are you doing here at this hour?" Sarah took a deep breath and stepped into the office. "Sir, I need to discuss something urgent with you. I've discovered some irregularities in the intelligence reports, and I believe there may be a security compromise." The color drained from Major Carson's face. He stood up slowly, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. "What exactly are you suggesting, Captain?" Sarah held up the report, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Sir, there's evidence of classified information being leaked to unauthorized parties. The pattern suggests someone with high-level access is involved." For a moment, the office was silent except for the distant hum of machinery. Major Carson's jaw tightened, and his eyes grew dark with anger. He had worked too hard and sacrificed too much to let his carefully constructed plan fall apart now. "You don't know what you're talking about," he said through gritted teeth. "You're way out of line here, Captain." Sarah maintained her composure, knowing that her duty to protect national security was more important than any personal consequences. "Sir, with all due respect, I have to report this through proper channels. The evidence is clear." Major Carson stepped closer, his face flushed with rage. "You naive little girl. You have no idea what forces you're messing with. Some things are bigger than your textbook understanding of military protocol." "Sir, I understand this is difficult, but we have sworn oaths to protect our country. I cannot ignore evidence of treason, regardless of who is involved." The word treason hit Major Carson like a physical blow. Years of careful planning, secret meetings, and substantial payments from foreign agents flashed through his mind. He thought about his gambling debts, his ex-wife's demands for alimony, and the promises he had made to people who did not tolerate failure. "You're going to destroy everything," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "You have no right to judge me. You don't know what I've been through." Sarah stood her ground, though she could sense the dangerous shift in his demeanor. "Major, I'm asking you to come with me to report this properly. If you cooperate, it will go better for everyone involved." Major Carson's hand moved toward the weapon holstered at his side, and for a terrifying moment, Sarah thought he might actually draw it. Instead, his arm swung in a wide arc, and his palm connected hard with her cheek. The sound of the slap echoed through the small office like a gunshot. Sarah staggered backward, her hand instinctively moving to her stinging cheek. The force of the blow had been unexpected and brutal. Major Carson had never shown any signs of violence before, and the sudden assault left her momentarily stunned. "That's what happens to people who don't mind their own business," Major Carson snarled. His face twisted with anger and desperation. "You should have kept your mouth shut, Captain. Now you've forced my hand." Sarah's training kicked in, and she quickly regained her composure. Despite the pain radiating through her face, she stood tall and looked Major Carson directly in the eyes. "Striking a subordinate officer is a serious offense, sir. This only makes things worse for you." Major Carson laughed bitterly. "Worse? You think this can get worse? I'm already finished if that report goes up the chain of command. At least this way I can buy myself some time to figure out an escape plan." He moved toward his desk, probably to destroy more evidence, but Sarah knew she had to act quickly. The report was still in her hands, and she needed to get it to the proper authorities before Major Carson could cover his tracks completely. "Sir, I strongly advise you to stop what you're doing and surrender yourself. Running will only make the charges more severe." Major Carson spun around, his eyes blazing with fury. "Surrender? To who? To you? You're nothing but a by-the-book academy graduate who thinks the world operates according to your precious regulations. Well, let me tell you something about the real world, Captain. Sometimes good people are forced to make impossible choices." Sarah felt a mixture of pity and disgust as she looked at the man who had once been her mentor and supervisor. "Sir, selling state secrets is never justified, regardless of personal circumstances. You've betrayed everything we stand for." The accusation hung in the air between them like poison gas. Major Carson's breathing became labored, and his hands shook with a combination of rage and fear. He had crossed a line from which there was no return, and they both knew it. "Get out of my office," he commanded, his voice low and threatening. "Forget what you think you know, and maybe we can both walk away from this." Sarah shook her head firmly. "I can't do that, sir. I won't do that." Outside the office, the base continued its quiet nighttime operations, unaware of the drama unfolding in the administrative building. Security guards made their rounds, night shift personnel monitored communication channels, and everything appeared normal on the surface. But Sarah knew that within minutes, everything would change. She had to get the report to the base commander immediately before Major Carson could warn his accomplices or destroy crucial evidence. As she turned to leave the office, she could hear him frantically making phone calls, probably trying to contact his handlers to arrange an emergency extraction. The corridor seemed longer now as Sarah hurried toward the exit. Her cheek still throbbed from the assault, and she could taste blood where her teeth had cut the inside of her mouth. But more than the physical pain, she felt the weight of responsibility for the safety and security of everyone on the base. As she reached the main entrance, Sarah looked back one last time at the administrative building. She knew that Major Carson was probably already planning his escape, but she also knew that justice would eventually catch up with him. The evidence was solid, and there were too many people involved for the conspiracy to remain hidden much longer. What Sarah didn't know was that her discovery had set in motion a series of events that would bring the highest levels of military command to Fort Harrison within hours. The report she carried contained information that went far beyond a simple case of espionage. It was connected to a much larger operation that threatened national security on multiple levels. The cool night air felt refreshing against her burning cheek as she stepped outside. Sarah took a moment to collect herself, knowing that the next few hours would be some of the most challenging of her military career. She had done the right thing, even though it had cost her personally. Now she had to see it through to the end, regardless of the consequences. Sarah Mitchell's hands were steady now as she knocked on Colonel James Webster's door at 0330 hours. The base commander's quarters were located in a separate building from the main administrative complex, and the walk had given her time to organize her thoughts and prepare for what she knew would be a difficult conversation. Colonel Webster opened the door in his bathrobe, his gray hair disheveled from sleep. Despite being awakened in the middle of the night, his eyes were alert and focused when he saw the serious expression on Sarah's face and the redness on her cheek. "Captain Mitchell, what's happened?" he asked immediately, stepping aside to let her into his modest living room. Sarah handed him the classified report and stood at attention. "Sir, I've discovered evidence of a major security breach involving the sale of classified intelligence to foreign agents. Major Carson is involved, and I believe there are others." Colonel Webster's expression grew grave as he scanned the documents. His military experience had taught him to recognize genuine crises, and this clearly qualified. The evidence was compelling and detailed, showing a pattern of information transfers that had been going on for months. "This is serious," he said quietly. "How did you come across this information?" Sarah explained her discovery process while the colonel continued reading. When she reached the part about confronting Major Carson, she hesitated for a moment before describing the assault. "He struck you?" Colonel Webster's voice carried a dangerous edge. "Yes, sir. When I told him I had to report the security breach through proper channels, he became violent and ordered me to keep quiet about what I had discovered." Colonel Webster set the report down and studied Sarah's face carefully. The bruise was already beginning to form along her cheekbone, and he could see the cut inside her mouth where her teeth had made contact. "Captain, I want you to know that you've done exactly the right thing by bringing this to me immediately. This type of betrayal strikes at the heart of everything we stand for as military officers." Sarah felt a wave of relief wash over her. She had been prepared for skepticism or even disbelief, but Colonel Webster's immediate acceptance of her report validated her decision to come forward. "Sir, Major Carson mentioned that this situation involves forces bigger than standard military protocol. I'm concerned that he may have accomplices both on and off the base." Colonel Webster nodded grimly. "That's exactly what worries me about this intelligence. Some of the classified information detailed in your report relates to ongoing operations that could compromise the safety of personnel in multiple locations." The colonel moved to his secure phone and began making calls to higher headquarters. Sarah could hear fragments of urgent conversations as he spoke with various officials, each call escalating the situation further up the chain of command. While Colonel Webster was occupied with his communications, Sarah's mind raced through the implications of what she had uncovered. Major Carson had seemed desperate enough to consider violence, which suggested that the consequences of exposure were severe for him personally. The foreign agents he was working with probably had significant leverage over him, possibly through blackmail or financial pressure. "Captain," Colonel Webster said, hanging up the phone, "I've notified division headquarters and several other agencies. This situation is now classified at the highest levels, and we're implementing immediate security protocols." Sarah nodded, understanding that her role in the investigation was far from over. "What are my orders, sir?" "First, I want you to report to the medical facility to have your injuries documented. The assault by Major Carson will be part of the charges against him. Then you'll be interviewed by investigators who are being flown in from Washington." The mention of investigators from the capital made Sarah realize just how significant her discovery really was. This wasn't just a local matter that could be handled through normal base procedures. The involvement of federal agencies suggested that national security was at stake on a much larger scale. "Sir, should I be concerned about my safety? If Major Carson was desperate enough to hit me, he might consider more drastic measures to prevent me from testifying." Colonel Webster's expression darkened. "I've already assigned security detail to watch both you and Major Carson. He's being monitored closely, though he doesn't know it yet. We want to see who he contacts and what he does next." As they spoke, Major Carson was indeed making frantic phone calls from his office. His foreign handlers were not pleased to learn that their operation had been compromised, and they were pressuring him to either eliminate the threat or extract himself immediately. The conversation was tense and full of implied threats about the consequences of failure. Carson knew that his options were limited. He could try to run, but military bases were not easy places to leave unnoticed, especially for someone under suspicion. He could attempt to discredit Captain Mitchell, but the evidence she had compiled was too solid to dismiss. His only real hope was that his handlers could somehow contain the situation before it spiraled completely out of control. Meanwhile, Sarah was at the base medical facility having her injuries photographed and documented. The medic on duty was professional but gentle as he examined her cheek and noted the signs of trauma. The physical evidence of Major Carson's assault would be crucial in the legal proceedings that were sure to follow. "Captain, you were lucky," the medic said as he applied ice to reduce the swelling. "A blow like that could have done much more damage if it had connected differently." Sarah winced as the cold pack touched her skin. It wasn't about the physical pain. What hurt more was seeing someone I respected completely abandon their principles. The medic nodded sympathetically. He had seen plenty of injuries over the years, but cases involving violence between military personnel always seemed to affect everyone more deeply. The bonds of trust and mutual respect that held military units together made such betrayals particularly devastating. By 0500 hours, the base was beginning to show signs of unusual activity. Additional security personnel had arrived from nearby installations, and several unmarked vehicles were parked near the administrative buildings. Most of the regular personnel were unaware that anything extraordinary was happening, but the increased presence of senior officers and security teams was beginning to attract attention. Colonel Webster had established a temporary command center in the secure conference room adjacent to his office. Representatives from military intelligence, the FBI, and other agencies were participating in the coordination of the investigation through secure video links. The scope of the operation was expanding rapidly as more connections were discovered. Sarah was called to provide her initial statement to the investigating team. The lead investigator, Agent Patricia Hayes from the Defense Intelligence Agency, was a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s who had handled numerous cases involving military espionage. "Captain Mitchell, your quick thinking and courage in reporting this matter may have prevented significant damage to ongoing operations," Agent Hayes said as she began the interview. "We need you to walk us through every detail of your discovery and your confrontation with Major Carson." Sarah provided a comprehensive account of the events, including her growing suspicions about Major Carson's behavior, the evidence she had uncovered, and the violent confrontation in his office. Agent Hayes asked detailed questions about specific documents, dates, and conversations that might be relevant to the broader investigation. The intelligence that Major Carson was selling included details about troop movements, communication protocols, and strategic planning documents, Agent Hayes explained. This information could have been used to compromise ongoing missions and put American personnel at risk. The gravity of the situation was becoming clearer to Sarah with each new detail. What had started as her suspicion about irregular behavior had uncovered a major threat to national security. She felt both proud of her role in stopping the leak and sobered by the realization of how much damage might have already been done. As the morning wore on, surveillance teams reported that Major Carson was becoming increasingly agitated. He had made several attempts to access classified systems beyond his normal authorization level, apparently trying to determine how much evidence existed against him. Each failed attempt was recorded and would be used as additional evidence of his guilt. Around 800 hours, Carson made a critical mistake. He attempted to contact one of his foreign handlers using an unsecured phone line, apparently unaware that all his communications were being monitored. The conversation was brief and cryptic, but it provided investigators with valuable intelligence about the broader spy network. "He's getting desperate," Agent Hayes reported to the command team. Our psychological profile suggests he's likely to either attempt an escape or do something drastic within the next few hours. Colonel Webster authorized increased security around Major Carson while maintaining the appearance of normal base operations. The goal was to gather as much intelligence as possible about his contacts and methods before making arrests that would shut down the investigation. Sarah was assigned to a safe location where she could continue providing information to investigators while remaining protected from any potential retaliation. The security detail assigned to her was discreet but thorough, ensuring that she could move around the base safely while the investigation continued. The tension was building toward a confrontation that would change Fort Harrison forever. Major Carson's world was collapsing around him, and he was running out of options. Sarah had set in motion a series of events that would soon bring the full weight of military justice down on everyone involved in the conspiracy. The next few hours would determine whether the traitors could be captured before they caused any more damage to national security. At exactly 09:45 hours, 3 black SUVs approached the main gate of Fort Harrison. The vehicles carried no identifying marks, but the security guards immediately recognized the significance of their arrival when they saw the occupants. General Patricia Morrison, the highest-ranking intelligence officer in the Army, stepped out of the lead vehicle, followed by General Robert Chen from Strategic Command and General Maria Vasquez from Internal Affairs. The base security team had been alerted to expect high-ranking visitors, but seeing 3 generals arrive together sent a clear message that something extraordinary was happening. Even Colonel Webster, despite his years of experience, felt his stomach tighten as he watched the convoy approach the command building. Sarah was in the secure conference room when Agent Hayes received the call that the generals had arrived. The investigation had been moving rapidly throughout the morning, with new evidence being uncovered every hour. Major Carson's attempts to contact his foreign handlers had provided valuable intelligence about the broader network, but they had also accelerated the timeline for decisive action. "Captain Mitchell," Agent Hayes said, "the senior command structure is here to personally oversee this situation. Your role in uncovering this conspiracy has attracted attention at the highest levels." Sarah felt a mixture of pride and nervousness as she realized that her actions had reached the attention of the Army's top leadership. She had done her duty, but the scale of the response suggested that the implications were far greater than she had initially understood. General Morrison entered the conference room with an air of authority that immediately commanded respect. She was known throughout the military for her brilliant strategic mind and unwavering commitment to national security. Her presence at Fort Harrison meant that the espionage case had been classified as a critical threat to ongoing operations. "Captain Mitchell," General Morrison said, extending her hand, "I want to personally thank you for your courage and dedication in bringing this matter to light. Your actions may have prevented significant damage to American interests." Sarah stood at attention and shook the general's hand. "Thank you, ma'am. I was simply doing my duty as an officer." General Chen, a quiet man with intense eyes, reviewed the evidence that had been compiled throughout the investigation. The intelligence that Major Carson was selling has been linked to 3 separate operations that were compromised in recent months. We now understand why those missions encountered unexpected resistance. The human cost of Major Carson's betrayal was becoming clear. American personnel had been put at risk because their enemies had advanced knowledge of their movements and objectives. Sarah felt sick as she realized that her former supervisor's greed had potentially cost lives. Major Carson's financial records show payments totaling over $200,000 from accounts linked to foreign intelligence services, General Vasquez reported. He's also accumulated significant gambling debts that made him vulnerable to recruitment. The psychological profile of the traitor was unfortunately familiar to the generals. Foreign agents were skilled at identifying military personnel who were facing financial or personal pressures that could be exploited. Major Carson had been a perfect target for recruitment. While the generals were being briefed on the investigation, Major Carson was making his final desperate moves. Surveillance teams reported that he had packed a bag and was preparing to leave the base. His communications with foreign handlers had become increasingly frantic as he realized that his cover was blown. "He's moving toward the motor pool," the surveillance team leader reported over the radio. "It looks like he's planning to steal a vehicle and make a run for it." General Morrison made the decision that would define the rest of the day. "All units, this is General Morrison. Major David Carson is to be arrested immediately on charges of espionage and treason. He is to be considered armed and dangerous." The order was transmitted throughout the base, and suddenly Fort Harrison transformed from a routine military installation into an active operation zone. Security teams moved swiftly to intercept Major Carson before he could reach the perimeter, while other units secured sensitive areas and prepared for potential violence. Carson was cornered near the vehicle maintenance facility when he realized that his escape route had been cut off. Security personnel surrounded him with weapons drawn, but he still had his service pistol and appeared willing to use it rather than surrender peacefully. "Major Carson, this is Colonel Webster," came the voice over a loudspeaker. "You are surrounded and have no way to escape. Surrender your weapon and submit to arrest." For a tense moment, Carson stood motionless with his pistol in his hand. Sarah, watching the scene unfold on security monitors in the command center, held her breath as she saw the man who had struck her facing the consequences of his choices. "I never meant for anyone to get hurt," Carson shouted back. "I was just trying to solve my financial problems. It wasn't supposed to go this far." General Morrison, who had taken personal command of the situation, spoke directly to Carson through the communication system. "Major, you have served your country for 15 years. Don't end your career and your life as a fugitive. Put down your weapon and surrender with dignity." The appeal to Carson's military service seemed to reach him on some level. His shoulders sagged as the reality of his situation finally sank in completely. He was surrounded. His foreign contacts had abandoned him, and his military career was over regardless of what happened next. Slowly, Carson placed his pistol on the ground and raised his hands above his head. Security teams moved in immediately to arrest him while ensuring that no other threats remained on the base. "Major David Carson, you are under arrest for espionage, treason, assault on a fellow officer, and violation of your oath as a military officer," the arresting officer announced as handcuffs were placed on Carson's wrists. Sarah felt a complex mixture of emotions as she watched her former supervisor being led away. There was satisfaction in seeing justice being served, but also sadness at the waste of what had once been a promising military career. Carson had thrown away everything he had worked for because of poor personal choices and foreign manipulation. General Morrison addressed the assembled staff in the base auditorium later that afternoon. "Today, Fort Harrison demonstrated both the vulnerability of our institutions to foreign influence and the strength of our system when good people do their duty. Captain Mitchell's actions exemplify the best traditions of military service." The general's words were followed by an announcement that had been coordinated at the highest levels of government. "Effective immediately, Fort Harrison will undergo a comprehensive security review and restructuring. All personnel will be rescreened, and new protocols will be implemented to prevent similar breaches in the future." The decision to close the base for restructuring had been made jointly by the Joint Chiefs of Staff and senior intelligence officials. The compromise of classified information required that all operations be suspended while investigators determined the full extent of the damage and implemented enhanced security measures. "This closure is not a punishment," General Chen explained to the base personnel. "It is a necessary step to ensure that Fort Harrison can continue to serve as a secure installation for critical operations. We expect the review process to take approximately 3 months. For Sarah, the day had been a whirlwind of emotions and revelations. She had started as a junior officer doing routine intelligence work and ended as a key figure in a major espionage investigation. The three generals had personally commended her for her courage and integrity, and she had been recommended for promotion and a commendation for her service. "Captain Mitchell," General Vasquez said in a private meeting, "you've shown remarkable judgment and courage under pressure. The Army needs officers like you in positions of greater responsibility." Sarah felt humbled by the recognition, but she also understood that her actions had been motivated by simple duty rather than any desire for personal advancement. "Thank you, ma'am. I just hope that Major Carson's betrayal hasn't caused irreparable damage to ongoing operations." "The damage was significant, but your quick action prevented it from being catastrophic," General Morrison replied. "The intelligence we've gathered from this investigation has helped us understand vulnerabilities in our security systems that we can now address." As the day ended, Fort Harrison was a changed place. Major Carson was in military custody awaiting trial. Several other personnel were under investigation for possible involvement in the espionage ring, and the base was preparing for an extended period of closure and restructuring. Sarah stood outside the command building as the three generals prepared to depart. The sun was setting behind the mountains, casting long shadows across the parade ground, where she had participated in so many ceremonies and formations. She knew that her military career had taken an unexpected turn, but she was proud of the choices she had made. General Morrison approached her one last time before leaving. "Captain, you've learned an important lesson today about the weight of responsibility that comes with military service. The decisions you make can have consequences far beyond what you might imagine." Sarah nodded, understanding that the events of the day would shape the rest of her career and her understanding of duty. "Yes, ma'am. I understand that protecting our country sometimes requires difficult choices." As the convoy of black SUVs disappeared into the distance, Sarah reflected on the chain of events that had begun with her discovery of irregular intelligence reports. A simple investigation had uncovered a major threat to national security, led to the arrest of a traitor, and resulted in the temporary closure of an entire military installation. The base would reopen stronger and more secure, with enhanced protocols and a renewed commitment to vigilance against foreign infiltration. Major Carson would face justice for his crimes, and the foreign agents who had recruited him would find their network compromised and their operations exposed. For Sarah, the day had proven that individual integrity and courage could make a difference even in the face of complex international threats. She had done her duty regardless of personal cost, and in doing so, she had upheld the highest traditions of military service. The bruise on her cheek would fade, but the lessons she had learned about leadership and responsibility would stay with her forever.